inspire, connect.
Resource. Growing healthy churches.
Is in relationship for God's mission.
Geoff, it's so good to see you today, and it's really good to see you, although it's on Zoom again. And of course, in the last 18 months, we've had a lot of conversations like this, but we did see each other in London just a few weeks ago.
We did. Yes, it's been strange, isn't it? Because you and I would see each other frequently. And I think when we met in London, that was the first time we'd seen each other for well over a year. Our lives have changed in the way that we meet together and communicate, and we do see each other a lot online. But it's so much better when it's in person.
I suppose,
yeah.
And so this gives me my chance to wish you a very happy New Year, you and Kaz.
Oh, thank you, and and the same to you. Thank you.
And we're going to be reflecting a bit on the new year, but we can't sort of artificially dismiss what's gone on before. So we'll think about that a bit as well. We're right in the context now of great uncertainty continuing, Geoff, in terms of the Omicron infections rising and all the implications that has. So there's been that long context of the pandemic, but there's been a bigger context for you as well, hasn't there?
Yes, there has. Sometimes my context seems to have been bigger than even the pandemic.
Yes.
It was back in July 2020 that I was admitted into hospital. I'd had excruciating back pain for about a month, and I'd visited a physio, and after a couple of sessions she said, you need to see a back specialist, and that was arranged, and I had an MRI, and I went straight to hospital with multiple compression fractures to my ribs and my spine. But underlying that was a diagnosis was given of myeloma, which is a blood cancer, which is highly treatable but uncurable ultimately. So that really did turn my life and the life of my family and close friends upside down. That was, as I said, that was in July 2020, and that was, of course, in the midst of the pandemic. I lose track of when we were in lockdown or not. I think probably we were in lockdown at that time, because Kaz said goodbye to me as I went into accident and emergency, and I was in hospital for 6 weeks, and I would say I didn't see her for those 2 weeks, but we did manage 2 occasions when we were able to be together, and that coordinated with significant appointments. But yeah, so that was in the midst of the pandemic, but you know, the two sort of went together, but my personal circumstances sort of, you know, became rather like that, you know.
Yes. So the most extraordinarily challenging circumstances, with the terms restriction, being restricted, and lockdown having a whole other set of layers for you.
Yes, I mean, there was another layer as well, Colin, because I was wearing a back brace, a sort of a thing that you strapped on, and I was due to go home after I think it was between 2 and 3 weeks, and the consultant came in one day and he said, well, great, home tomorrow, see you in clinic on Friday. And Kaz had arranged the home. She'd got a hospital bed downstairs and everything. And then he came back later and he said, I've just had a communication from a specialist hospital in Stanmore in London, and they've looked at the MRI scan and said that the back brace, neck and back brace, or the back brace you're wearing is a RoboCop job, and you need to have a specially constructed one. So at that point I was on strict bed rest, which meant I couldn't sit up more than 45 degrees. So in terms of restriction and limitation, there was another dimension to it, because absolutely everything had to be done for me. Yes, so that was 3 weeks where, you know, I was basically immobile. And of course, if you're in bed for 3 weeks, you then get out of bed and you have to learn to walk again. So I was reading a book by Barbara Brown Taylor called Learning to Walk in the Dark, And I'd read it before, and it hadn't really touched me, but on this occasion it really did, because there was, I mean, it was a time of darkness. In one sense, it was a time of experiencing God's presence very closely. I mean, it was tender, it was beautiful at times, but it was a dark place to be, and of course I was literally having to learn to walk again. So, but anyway, I got the back brace and the back and neck brace. I say that because it came up here. It was like I looked like something out of the cast of Star Wars. All I needed was the helmet, and I would have made a good stormtrooper. But so it was very restrictive, and then of course I wore that for 3 months. And as you said at the beginning, all around this you've got the pandemic going off, and it was a very strange place to be.
And here you are sitting there now. Obviously, we can only see you chest upwards, but how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay. I mean, I'm in remission. I was in remission at Christmas because the chemo that I received, I was on a sort of constant treatment of chemo. That brought me into remission. This year I've had a stem cell transplant. A nurse said, "We're going to kill you, and then we're going to bring you back to life again." That's what a stem cell transplant is. So that was probably not the best experience of my life, but it was brilliant because, of course, it did what it was meant to do. So I am in total remission at present. I'm on a maintenance course, which has only just become available on the NHS, so that could well extend remission further if I can keep on to it. I think the main thing, if you saw me walk, I'm wobbly on my feet because neuropathy I have in my feet and a bit in my hands. That's just one of the results of chemotherapy. I mean, chemotherapy is wonderful, but it has very sometimes it can have very damaging side effects.
So as you sit there now, going into a new year, reflecting on the last 18 months, this huge amount of things that you challenged as best you could, you kept connected to God and of course to other people in the ways that you could manage to do.
And I mean, I have worked through that time. You see, I mean, I had 3 months off and another 3 months off, but I've been engaged otherwise. Sorry, I've interrupted your flow.
No, that's really helpful because as part of your work and your calling on the way, you've started your role as Baptist Union president from May, and you're 7 months in. So how's that going, Geoff? And what are you noticing, given the very, very distinctive perspective that you will have?
Well, the first thing to say is it was a slow start because when I was actually welcomed, inducted, whatever you call it, we had to pre-record it before I went into hospital for the stem cell transplant. And at the time of the assembly, I'd only been out of hospital for a couple of weeks, so I was still in a state of recovery. So it was a bit of a slow start. So it didn't really happen until June, and then of course it was the summer. I think a lot of my contact has been through Zoom, so it's quite hard to assess the sort of it's hard to connect in that sense. I mean, you're speaking to people, you're having some sort of feedback, but it's not like face to face. So or not like being there in person. So but I think since September, well, there have been a number of things. Since September, I have been engaged in the way I expected to when I was first elected. So I have met with people. I've had a fair amount of sort of correspondence, and I think the thing that is encouraging is that my theme has found a real resonance with people.
Just remind us what your theme is, Geoff.
The theme is attentive to rhythms of grace. And I've observed recently that and I guess this is the noticing, that the theme is working almost independently of me. There's something about it. It as I say, it finds a resonance with people, and especially at this time, because um, you know, we're especially needing to notice where God is in all of this. I mean, when I decided on the theme, it was as a result of. I mean, I'll speak about this when I come to the ministers' conference, but it was as a result of seeing a kingfisher, really wanting to see a kingfisher, and seeing it so close to home that it came as an amazing surprise and a gift and a moment of grace, and from that there was this sense that every time I walked through the parkland nearby the house, I was watching for the kingfisher, always watching for the kingfisher, and it seemed to me to be a beautiful picture of how we might live life, watching for God, noticing God. And I think in this time, for me personally, the challenge has been to live out that theme in my own personal circumstances, and to see how that works out in the circumstances in which we find ourselves in this COVID world.
And of course, for many of those people that are watching, it may even have been on the lips of some who are watching. I didn't sign up for this.
No,
I didn't expect for the shape of my ministry and the way in which I'm trying to serve God and serve people to look like this. And for many, it's been understandably extraordinarily difficult and painful, actually, and has raised big questions. So you had your personal experience of that. I'm wondering how this theme of being attentive to the rhythms of grace works when the shape of what you imagined, a bit like your presidency, isn't as you imagined, and for quite a long period of time it's not like that.
I mean, I think alongside the fact that the theme finds a resonance, I mean, there's considerable anxiety, which is, perfectly reasonable. I mean, we live in anxious times. I mean, we really don't know what next year is going to have in store in terms of, further restrictions. Are we going to be back to where we were? Are we going to be in a worse situation? I mean, all this sort of stuff. I was in a conversation with somebody the other day, and a minister, but not in pastoral charge. And I said to him at one point, I said, I wouldn't want your job. And he turned around to me and he said, I wouldn't want to be a pastor of a church at the moment. And yes. I thought to myself, no, that's spot on. I mean, I'm hugely in awe of those who have, just sort of knuckled down and got on with this. I mean, we now have the benefit of some distance, but I mean, can you remember back to March 2020? I mean, ministers went into overdrive and learnt new skills and transferred their worship to online worship. I mean, ministers who aren't naturally gifted in that area, who don't find that sort of stuff, really, makes them buzz. But they did an amazing job. But then, of course, when you get to the other side of it, and there's some sense, or I would say promise, or of normality or a new normal, at that point they're exhausted, and yet there's a new job to be done. It's like sort of running a marathon. You get to the end of it and think, whew, and I don't know, have you run a marathon? You've done a half.
I've done one marathon. Yeah.
You've done a marathon, so you know what it's like.
Yeah.
You get to 26.2, and at the end you cross the line. That's it. But I think for ministers,
and Geoff, you cry, in my experience, not just me, lots of other people.
No, that's
because
right.
It just seems so extraordinary that you've got to the end. One of the things that's happening at the moment is that people thought, as you've just said, they might be getting to the end of all this.
Well, this is it.
Actually, it's facing it again. So
well, that's it. So you get to the end of the marathon, you cross the line at 26.2, and then somebody says, right, you've got to go round again. But this time it's a different route because you're in a different place, and that is, I mean, that's a very, very big deal. So
when you come to us in February for our Ministers and Leaders Conference, which we're really looking forward to, by the way.
Well, I am. Can I just say I'm looking forward to it, because when it's come to this sort of thing so far, I've only done it online. So it's going to be great to actually be there.
Be together. When it comes to that, you're going to be sharing with us from your extraordinary experience of the last, what will then be 20 months, but also the experience, it's a shared experience for so many, and one which has not come to an end. So we're really looking forward to you helping us think about what being attentive to rhythms of grace, external to ourselves as well as internal to ourselves, might be about.
And I want to do that by, looking generally at the theme of, being attentive to grace, watching for the kingfisher, as I put it. And there are a number of areas in relation to that I'd like to explore, some briefly, others at a bit more length. But I also want to do something on attentive to rhythms of grace in weakness, in vulnerability. Because I think that through this I am learning stuff that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. It could not have come to me had I not gone through and continue to go through this experience. And rather than be self-indulgent, I do want to share personally, but I do want to sort of reflect theologically on our vulnerability, and also I'd like to have a conversation, recognizing that we are all in a vulnerable state. There's what I would call, we have extraordinary experiences of vulnerability, and I guess that's been my experience. But whoever we are, we will experience vulnerability, and sometimes very painful vulnerability in our lives and our ministries. And I think that at this present time, there's a lot of that around. I needed to go back into hospital at the end of September. It wasn't cancer related, but I am immunosuppressed, and I picked up a fungal lung infection. So I was in hospital for 2 weeks, and I needed another 2 weeks of recovery at home with very strong medication. It meant I couldn't go to our ministers' conference, and I was absolutely gutted, because it would have been my last ministers' conference, because I retire from this role next summer, and it would have been my 19th one. It was very painful not being able to go there. But the thing I heard about the conference, which incidentally was really fantastic, was that there was a shared sense of vulnerability. My colleague Colin had also been in hospital, and but aside from that, there were not. I don't know if there were any people who were not in that place of really feeling that, and I think that made the conference very special. So I don't expect the Southern Counties to be very much different from the Central Baptist Association. We're all in this place where life is extremely challenging, and our capacity to keep on keeping on is at times feels very limited. I've always said that, and this sounds really cheesy, so take it or leave it, but I've always said as a regional minister that my heroes are the ministers of the church, because I know what it's like to do that stuff. I did it for many years, and engaging with ministers, I tend to go into a situation and then come out of it.
I often look back actually over the times where outwardly speaking and in real fact things seem to go well, and all the time as I look back I think of particularly as well the local leaders in the churches that I've been in, and how nothing could have happened without them being totally brilliant and frankly complementing who I am and what I bring. It couldn't have happened for me on my own. So we look forward to welcoming lots of people to the Leaders and Ministers Conference, and to what you're going to share with us, Geoff, very, very much. At such a time as this, seems to be very, very important as well.
And thank you. Can I just say thank you for reminding me there, because when we have our conference, it's very much the ministers' conference, but yours is ministers and leaders. And I think the point you make there is a really, really important one, that actually, when I look back in ministry, it's those people who were ministering, who were ministers with me. That's really, really, really important to stress.
So as we go into, we look forward to that in February, as we go into 2022, is there some sense of a particular important theme or a particular understanding of God that you take in afresh, or you take in for the first time as we continue into 2022?
I think for me, I mean, I'm looking ahead to July, when I'll stop being the regional minister team leader. So that's quite a significant thing. So we're in a time of transition. I think, but I'm not thinking beyond that, and what I'm wanting to do, and I think I'm doing, and maybe this comes out of my experiences, I'm trying to be present to each day. It's the sort of one day at a time kind of thing, and I think that's become more important to me. For many years, I prayed a prayer on a daily basis from my owner. And it began, Creator God, your kindness has brought us the gift of a new day. Help us not to cling to yesterday, nor covet tomorrow, but to accept the uniqueness of today. And I feel that the uniqueness of today is really important for me, that I need to be present to each day.
And that sounds like a very intentional, very active way of seeing
yes, it is.
Day, Geoff.
I mean, the thing about my condition is I don't know what my life expectancy is, and I might live for another 10 years, but I might not, and so I don't want to waste those days. I want to live them as fully as I can. So, and we all talk about this stuff, don't we? We all sort of talk about not living with yesterday or tomorrow, but today. But it's actually, I mean, it's just much harder to do. And I think being attentive to rhythms of grace is another thing that sounds lovely, but actually it's quite hard to do. To be intentionally in that place, to put oneself in the place where you're wanting to notice God's presence and action in each day. It sounds really great, and you want to sign up for that, but the actual doing of it is it's very easy just to let it all pass by. So
I foolishly, Geoff, once upon a time thought I was making progress in that area. Now I feel as though it's harder and harder than ever before. So, you're quite right. Talking about it's one thing, but and
I'm not sure that I'm going to be particularly effective in what I want to do, but that's my aspiration anyway. Yeah.
Well, it's an aspiration that we want to share with you and we look forward to it very, very much. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us and sharing with us in Southern Counties Baptist Association today, and God bless you as you go into 2022.
Well, thank you, Colin. It's been a real delight, as always, speaking with you, and my love to you and Alison. Okay.
Thank you.
Inspire, connect,
Resource. Growing healthy churches.
is in relationship for God's mission.